The afternoon sun streamed through the high palace windows, casting golden light across Princess Katerina Tanner's fingers as they danced across the keys of her Bosendorfer grand piano. The music room in the eastern wing of the Vorosian imperial palace was her sanctuary, the only place where she could truly be herself, where the weight of royal expectations momentarily lifted from her shoulders. "Your Imperial Highness," a soft voice interrupted, causing Katerina to falter on a particularly delicate passage of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. She turned to find Lady Helena, her lady-in-waiting, standing in the doorway with an apologetic smile. "The Emperor requests your presence in his study immediately," Helena said, her voice tinged with the appropriate deference. Katerina nodded, carefully lowering the piano's full-board. "Of course." As she followed Helena through the labyrinthine corridors of the palace, Katerina's thoughts drifted to her father's summons. At 23, she knew what such private meetings typically entailed: another diplomatic marriage proposal, another potential alliance with a neighboring kingdom or empire. The Austro-Hungarian Empire's influence had been waning since the Great War, and their small kingdom of Varosia, nestled between greater powers, survived through careful alliances and strategic marriages. As the youngest daughter of Emperor Friedrich VI, Katerina had always understood her duty to the crown. Her father stood by the window when she entered, his military posture rigid even in the privacy of his study. The medals adorning his chest caught the light as he turned. "Katerina, my dear," he said, his voice carrying the weight of his 62 years. "Please, sit." She complied, arranging her pale blue dress carefully as she took the seat across from his massive oak desk. "I've received correspondence from the Ottoman court," he began, his tone measured. "The Sultan's nephew, Prince Mehmed, has expressed interest in a union between our families." Katerina's heart sank, though she maintained her practiced smile. "I see, father. This would be a favorable alliance, especially considering the recent tensions along our southern border." He placed a small portrait on the desk, sliding it toward her. "By all accounts, the prince is educated, cultured, and would make a suitable husband." She glanced at the portrait, a handsome man with dark eyes and a solemn expression, dressed in formal military attire. Another stranger to whom she would be expected to pledge her life. "When would the betrothal be announced?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "After the summer diplomatic season," the emperor replied. "You would travel to Constantinople in the autumn." Constantinople. So far from everything and everyone she knew. Far from her beloved music, from the palace conservatory where she had spent countless hours perfecting her craft under the tutelage of Europe's finest instructors. "May I have some time to consider, father?" she asked, though they both knew her response was merely a formality. The emperor's expression softened slightly. "Of course, my dear. But remember, our kingdom's security depends on such alliances." She nodded, rose, and curtsied before departing, her mind already racing with the implications of this new development. Later that evening, Katerina stood on her balcony, gazing out at the palace gardens below. The spring air carried the sweet scent of lilacs, and in the distance, the lights of the capital city twinkled like earthbound stars. A gentle knock at her chamber door roused her from her thoughts. Her older sister, Princess Eleonora, entered without waiting for a response, a privilege only she was afforded. "I heard about father's plans," Eleonora said, crossing the room to join Katerina on the balcony. At 29, she had already fulfilled her royal duty, married to the Crown Prince of Saxony. "Constantinople," Katerina murmured. "It might as well be the end of the earth." Eleonora placed a comforting hand on her sister's shoulder. "The Ottoman court is quite cultured. I hear they appreciate music greatly." "It's not the same," Katerina replied. "Music isn't merely an appreciation for me, it's my breath, my heartbeat." "I know, little nightingale," Eleonora said, using the childhood nickname that had stuck after Katerina's music tutors had marveled at her natural talent. "But we all make sacrifices for Varosia." That night, sleep eluded the princess. When dawn broke, she made a decision that would alter the course of her life. If she had only months of freedom remaining, she would use them meaningfully. For years, she had supported various charitable causes throughout the kingdom: hospitals, orphanages, schools, but always from a distance, always through formal visits and carefully orchestrated ceremonies. Now, she wanted something more authentic. Princess Katerina approached her father with an unusual request: permission to undertake a tour of the rural provinces to establish music education programs for children, as a personal legacy before her betrothal. The emperor, seeing an opportunity for positive public relations during uncertain times, reluctantly agreed, though he insisted on a small security detail. And so, as spring blossomed across the countryside, the princess began her journey, traveling with a modest entourage to the eastern provinces of Varosia. They brought instruments, sheet music, and Katerina's unwavering belief in the transformative power of music. The village of Mahrenfeld was their third stop, a picturesque settlement nestled in a valley, surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests. Like many rural communities, it had suffered during the war, losing many of its young men and struggling to rebuild in the decade since. The local schoolhouse was a simple stone building with large windows and worn wooden floors that creaked beneath Katerina's feet as she entered. A dozen pairs of curious eyes turned to her, children ranging from 6 to 12 years old, seated on simple benches, their clothes clean but mended in multiple places. At the front of the room stood their teacher, a tall man with thoughtful eyes and an air of quiet dignity despite his humble surroundings. His dark hair was slightly too long, as if haircuts were an afterthought, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up to the elbows. "Your Imperial Highness," he said, bowing deeply. "I am Zachary Iverson, the village schoolmaster. We are deeply honored by your visit." The children scrambled to their feet, attempting clumsy bows and curtsies that brought a genuine smile to Katerina's face. "The honor is mine, Mr. Iverson," she replied. "I understand you've already introduced some music instruction to your curriculum." A flash of passion illuminated his features. "Yes, Your Highness. With very limited resources, I'm afraid. We have one violin, a damaged flute, and an old piano that's seen better days." "May I see the piano?" He led her to a small adjoining room where a battered upright piano stood against the wall. Katerina ran her fingers over the yellowed keys, pressing one gently. The note rang out, slightly flat but not beyond repair. "It was donated by the former manor house before the war," Zachary explained. "I've attempted to keep it in tune, but my skills are limited." Katerina sat on the bench and began to play, her fingers compensating for the piano's deficiencies. A simple Mozart piece filled the room, and she was aware of the children gathering in the doorway, their eyes wide with wonder. When she finished, the silence held a reverent quality, broken only when the youngest child, a little girl with braided blonde hair, whispered, "It sounds like heaven." Katerina turned to find Zachary watching her with an expression that caught her off guard, not the usual deference she encountered, but something closer to recognition, as if he saw beyond her title to the person beneath. "You play beautifully, Your Highness," he said quietly. "Music has always been my greatest joy," she replied, surprised by her own candor. The next day, crates arrived from the capital, violins, flutes, small drums, and sheet music specially selected for beginners. The children's excitement was palpable as they gathered in the schoolhouse, their faces shining with anticipation. Katerina had planned to stay in Mahrenfeld for 3 days before moving on to the next village. Those 3 days stretched into a week as she worked alongside Zachary to establish a proper music program. She found herself rising each morning with a sense of purpose that had long been absent from her life within the palace walls. Zachary proved to be not only an excellent teacher but also surprisingly knowledgeable about music. During a lesson with the older children, Katerina observed as he demonstrated proper violin technique. "You play quite well," she commented later, as they organized sheet music while the children were at lunch. "Where did you study?" A shadow crossed his face. "Vienna Conservatory, briefly. Before the war." She looked at him with new interest. "You studied at the conservatory? That's remarkable." He shrugged, a gesture that seemed to dismiss years of training. "A different life. A different time. What brought you to Mahrenfeld?" Zachary hesitated, arranging music scores with careful precision. "The war changed many things, Your Highness. Afterward, I needed peace. Purpose. These children needed education more than Vienna needed another struggling musician. There was more to his story, Katerina sensed, but she didn't press. Everyone carried wounds from the war years, some visible, others hidden beneath polite conversation and daily routines. As they worked together, a quiet understanding developed between them. Zachary never treated her with the stiff formality that created distance between Katerina and most people outside the royal family. Instead, he spoke to her as a fellow teacher, a fellow musician, a person of value beyond her title. On her 5th day in Mehrenfeld, rain poured from leaden skies, transforming the village's dirt roads into muddy streams. Inside the schoolhouse, Katerina sat at the piano with 8-year-old Anna, guiding the child's small fingers over the keys. Like this, she demonstrated, playing a simple scale. Each finger has its own strength. After the lesson, she found Zachary by the window, watching the downpour. "The roads will be impassable by evening," he said, concern evident in his voice. "Your return to the inn might be difficult." The royal entourage was staying at the village's only inn, a comfortable if modest establishment a half-mile from the schoolhouse. "Perhaps we should end early today," Katerina suggested. Zachary shook his head. "If your highness permits, I have another suggestion. My cottage is just behind the schoolhouse. You could wait there until your guards bring a carriage, rather than risking the walk in this deluge." Under normal circumstances, such an arrangement would be unthinkable. A princess alone in a schoolteacher's cottage would cause a scandal, regardless of the innocent circumstances. But here, far from the rigid protocols of court life, different rules seemed to apply. "Thank you, Mr. Iverson. That's very kind." His cottage proved to be a simple 2-room structure, immaculately kept despite its modest furnishings. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes of literature, philosophy, and, Katerina noted with interest, numerous works on music theory and composition. While Zachary stoked the fire, she examined the books, running her fingers along the spines. "You have quite a collection." "Books travel more easily than pianos," he replied with a small smile. "Please, sit. I'll make tea." As the rain drummed against the windows, they talked, really talked, in a way Katerina had rarely experienced. Zachary spoke of his childhood in a middle-class family in Vienna, his early passion for music, and his studies at the conservatory. He alluded to his war service but didn't elaborate, and Katerina sensed it was territory best left unexplored. In turn, she found herself sharing aspects of palace life she'd never discussed with outsiders, the suffocating weight of protocol, her love of composing music in secret, her fears about the upcoming marriage to a stranger in a foreign court. "I'm sorry," she said abruptly, realizing how inappropriate such confidences were. "I shouldn't burden you with these matters." "It's not a burden to listen to another person's truth," Zachary said quietly. "Even if that person happens to be a princess." When her guards eventually arrived with a carriage, Katerina left with reluctance, carrying the warmth of their conversation with her like a talisman. The days that followed brought a deepening connection between them, built through shared purpose and mutual respect. Katerina found herself looking forward to each morning at the schoolhouse, each moment working alongside this man who saw her as more than her title. On a golden afternoon during her 2nd week in Mehrenfeld, they took the children to a meadow near the school, where they sat in a circle playing simple recorders Katerina had brought from the capital. The sound was far from perfect, squeaks and missed notes punctuated the simple folk tune, but the joy on the children's faces was undeniable. "Music gives them something the war took away," Zachary said softly, standing beside her as they watched the children practice. "A sense that beauty still exists in the world." "Is that what it gave you?" Katerina asked, glancing at him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the careful distance between teacher and princess, commoner and royal, seemed to dissolve. "Among other things," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. That evening, unable to sleep, Katerina penned a letter to her sister, *dearest Eleonora*. Mehrenfeld has captured my heart in ways I never anticipated. The children here are extraordinary, so eager to learn, so responsive to music despite having so little. Their teacher, Mr. Iverson, is equally remarkable. a conservatory-trained musician who chose to bring education to this remote village after the war. I find myself reluctant to continue to the next village on my itinerary. The work here feels unfinished, the connection to these children, to this place, deepening with each passing day. I know what you would say, that I'm merely postponing the inevitable, that Constantinople awaits regardless of how long I linger in the countryside. Perhaps you're right. Yet for the first time in my life, I feel truly useful, truly seen. Is it foolish to treasure these fleeting moments of authenticity, knowing they cannot last? Your loving sister. Katerina. The following day, disaster struck. One of the younger children, playing too enthusiastically, knocked over an oil lamp during the lunch break. Flames spread quickly across the wooden floor of the music room. Zachary and Katerina worked frantically alongside the villagers to form a bucket brigade from the nearby well. Though they managed to save the main schoolroom, the music room suffered significant damage. Worst of all, the piano, old and battered as it was, had been destroyed. The children stood in the schoolyard, faces smudged with soot, watching as smoke rose from the damaged building. Little Anna tugged at Katerina's sleeve, tears streaming down her dirt-stained cheeks. "The music is gone," she sobbed. Katerina knelt beside her. "No, sweet one. The music is never gone. It lives in here." She touched the child's heart, and here, she touched her head. "We'll make music again, I promise." Later, as they surveyed the damage, Zachary's usual composure faltered. "All your work, Your Highness. All the instruments you brought." "Instruments can be replaced," Katerina said firmly. "And we saved most of them. It's the room that suffered, not the music program itself." Even so, without a proper space. An idea formed in Katerina's mind, impulsive perhaps, but deeply right. What if we built something better? A proper music room, attached to the school but designed specifically for teaching and performances. Zachary looked at her with surprise. Such a project would require significant resources. "Resources I have access to," she replied. "My personal funds, not the Crown's." She hesitated, then added softly, "It would be my legacy to Mehrenfeld before I depart for Constantinople." The mention of her impending departure hung between them, unacknowledged but undeniably present. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Katerina sent for an architect from the capital, approved designs for a modest but purpose-built music room with proper acoustics, and arranged for materials to be transported to the village. Local craftsmen were hired, providing much-needed employment. Throughout the process, she and Zachary worked side by side, planning lessons in temporary spaces, salvaging what they could from the damaged room, and overseeing the construction. One evening, they stayed late at the schoolhouse, reviewing architectural drawings by lamplight. Outside, summer rain pattered gently against the windows. "The children have improved remarkably in such a short time," Zachary commented, setting aside the drawings. "Especially Anna. She has a natural gift." "Like someone else I know," Katerina smiled. "You never told me why you left the conservatory. You clearly had talent." Zachary was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice held a rawness she hadn't heard before. "I was drafted in 1916. Sent to the Italian front." He rubbed his left hand unconsciously. "A shell explosion. When I woke in the field hospital, 2 fingers on my left hand were gone. Not enough to be sent home, but enough to end any dreams of performing." Katerina's gaze fell to his hand, noticing for the first time the missing ring and little fingers. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I was one of the fortunate ones," he said, his voice steadying. "I survived. When I returned to Vienna after the armistice, everything had changed. The empire collapsed, the city was hungry, and there seemed little place for damaged musicians." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I had a choice, to dwell on what was lost, or to find a new purpose. These children became that purpose." Impulsively, Katerina reached out, placing her hand over his scarred one. "You've given them such a gift. Not just education, but hope." His fingers curled around hers, warm and strong despite their incompleteness. For a breathless moment, they remained thus connected, the touch speaking volumes that words could not safely express. Then, remembering himself, Zachary gently withdrew his hand. "It grows late, Your Highness. Your guards will be concerned." The moment broke, reality reasserting itself between them. As July blazed into August, the new music room took shape. Katerina's planned departure had been postponed multiple times, with increasingly terse correspondence from the capital. Her father's patience was wearing thin, but she couldn't bear to leave before seeing the project completed. More concerning were her own feelings, which had developed far beyond what was appropriate or wise. In Zachary, she had found not just a dedicated teacher or talented musician, but a kindred spirit who understood her in ways no one at court ever had. Each morning brought both joy at seeing him and pain in knowing their time together was finite. Constantinople loomed in her future, an arrangement that duty demanded she honor. The music room was completed in mid-August, a beautiful space with high ceilings, large windows, and a new upright piano that Katerina had ordered from Vienna. The village organized a celebration to mark the occasion and to thank the princess for her generosity. Tables were set up in the village square, laden with local specialties. Children performed folk dances, and several played simple pieces on their new instruments, their faces shining with pride as the villagers applauded. As twilight fell, lanterns were lit around the square, casting a golden glow over the festivities. Katerina found herself momentarily alone, watching from the periphery as the celebration continued. Zachary approached, offering a cup of cider. "You've transformed this village, Your Highness. The children will never forget you." "I've merely provided resources," she replied. "You're the one who will continue the work after I'm gone." The word "gone" hung heavy between them. "When do you depart?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. 3 days. My father's latest letter was quite explicit. The Ottoman envoy awaits in the capital. She looked down at her cup, unable to meet his gaze. "I've delayed the inevitable long enough." "Of course," Zachary said, his formal tone returning. "Your duty to the crown must take precedence." "Must it?" The question escaped before she could stop it, barely audible above the music and laughter from the square. He looked at her then, his expression unguarded for once. "Katerina," he said, using her name without title for the first time. "If circumstances were different." "But they aren't," she finished for him, reality settling cold and heavy in her chest. The evening ended with a performance by the village's newly formed children's choir, singing a folk song about a bird yearning for freedom. Katerina watched through tears she refused to shed, knowing that tomorrow she must begin packing for her return to the capital. Her last day in Mehrenfeld dawned clear and bright, summer at its most magnificent. She spent the morning at the schoolhouse, giving final instructions about the music program and saying goodbye to each child individually. Anna clung to her, sobbing. "Please don't go to Constantinople, Princess. Stay and teach us music forever." Katerina held the child close. "I must go, sweet one. But I'll write to you, and Mr. Iverson will continue your lessons. Perhaps someday you'll play at the imperial court." When only Zachary remained, Katerina found herself unable to form the words of farewell she had rehearsed. He solved the dilemma by handing her an envelope. "A parting gift, Your Highness. Please don't open it until you're well on your journey." "Thank you for everything," she managed, her voice threatening to break. "The children are fortunate to have you." "And I was fortunate to have these weeks working alongside you," he replied simply. They stood facing each other, a universe of unspoken words between them. "I should go," she said finally. "My entourage is waiting." Zachary bowed formally. "Safe travels, Your Imperial Highness." And just like that, it was over. Katerina left the schoolhouse for the last time, climbed into her carriage, and departed Mehrenfeld, leaving a piece of her heart behind in that small village with its dedicated schoolteacher and music-loving children. Miles down the road, when the village had disappeared from view, she remembered the envelope. Inside was a handwritten musical score, a composition for piano titled simply for the princess. The melody, even as she read it silently, carried echoes of their conversations, the children's laughter, the peaceful beauty of the village. On the final page, Zachary had written a brief note: "Music, once created, can never truly be lost. It remains in the spaces between heartbeats, in the silence between words, in memories that distance cannot diminish. Whatever duties await you, know that you have brought immeasurable light to our small corner of the world. For that, and for being simply Katerina in moments when you might have remained only a princess, I shall be forever grateful. With deepest respect and admiration. Z.I. Tears blurred her vision as she carefully folded the score and held it to her heart. The return to palace life was jarring. After weeks of meaningful work and authentic connections, the elaborate protocols and political machinations of court seemed more stifling than ever. Katerina went through the motions, attending fittings for her betrothal ceremony, studying Ottoman customs and language, and preparing for her new life. At night, alone in her chambers, she played Zachary's composition on her grand piano, the melody evoking memories of Mehrenfeld with painful clarity. 2 weeks after her return, as the date of her formal betrothal ceremony approached, Katerina received an unexpected visitor. Her old music teacher, Professor Müller, arrived at the palace requesting an audience. "Your Highness," he said, bowing as he entered her music room. "Forgive the intrusion, but I've come across something I believe will interest you greatly." "Of course, Professor. Please sit." The elderly musician settled into a chair, his expression unusually animated. "I recently attended a conference of music educators in Vienna. There was much discussion of innovative teaching methods, particularly for children in rural areas." Katerina's interest was piqued. "Indeed?" "Yes. A paper was presented detailing a remarkable program in a village called Mehrenfeld. The author described teaching methods that combined classical training with folk traditions, adapted for children with limited resources." Her heart quickened. "Mr. Iverson's work." "Precisely. The paper has caused quite a stir in academic circles. The conservatory is interested in developing similar programs throughout the former empire." Müller paused. "The most interesting aspect, however, was the dedication." "Dedication?" "To an unnamed princess who saw value in bringing music to those society had forgotten." Müller's kind eyes held hers. "Your time in Mehrenfeld made quite an impression, Your Highness." That night, Katerina made a decision that would alter the course of her life. She requested a private audience with her father, steeling herself for the confrontation to come. The emperor received her in his study, concern evident in his features. "You look troubled, my daughter." "Father," she began, her voice steadier than she'd expected, "I cannot proceed with the betrothal to Prince Mehmed." Friedrich's expression darkened. "Cannot or will not?" "This is not a matter of preference, Katerina. The arrangements have been made." "The Ottoman envoy, I understand the political implications," she interrupted, something she had never done before. "But I am asking you now as your daughter, not as a princess. There is important work I've begun in Varosia, work that could benefit our people far more than my marriage to a foreign prince." "What work could possibly outweigh the security of our borders?" Katerina took a deep breath. "Education, father. Music education for children across our kingdom, particularly in areas still recovering from the war. I've seen firsthand how it transforms communities, gives hope where there was none." The emperor's frown deepened. "A noble cause, certainly, but not one that requires a princess. We can fund such programs without sacrificing a strategic alliance." "It's not just about funding," Katerina persisted. "It's about leading by example, about showing our people that the royal family truly cares for their welfare, their children's futures." She hesitated, then added softly, "It's about finding purpose beyond the accident of my birth." Friedrich studied her for a long moment. This sudden passion for education wouldn't happen to be connected to a certain schoolmaster in Mehrenfeld, would it? Katerina felt heat rise to her cheeks but met her father's gaze steadily. "Mr. Iverson is a gifted educator whose methods deserve wider implementation. My interest is in the work itself." It wasn't entirely a lie, but it wasn't the complete truth either. Her father, shrewd as ever, recognized the evasion. "Katerina," he said, his tone gentler, "I was young once too. I understand the appeal of romance, especially with someone forbidden." He sighed. "But feelings fade. Duty endures. The treaty with the Ottomans will secure our southern border for generations. And if I refuse?" The question hung in the air between them, dangerous and unprecedented. The emperor's expression hardened. "Then you would place your personal desires above the welfare of your country. I did not raise you to be so selfish." The accusation struck deep. Katerina had never considered herself selfish, quite the opposite. She had always tried to fulfill her responsibilities as a royal daughter. Yet now, faced with a lifetime bound to a stranger in a distant land, she found herself questioning the very nature of duty. "May I propose a compromise?" she asked finally. Friedrich raised an eyebrow, indicating she should continue. "Give me 1 year. 1 year to establish a royal foundation for music education throughout Varosia. Let me prove the value of this work before I'm sent away." She leaned forward, her voice urgent. "If, after that time, you still believe my marriage to Prince Mehmed is necessary for the kingdom's security, I will comply without further objection." The emperor considered this, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "The Ottoman court will not take kindly to such a delay." "Then tell them I'm undertaking important royal duties that cannot be interrupted. Tell them it's a matter of Varosian tradition that princesses complete certain obligations before marriage." She was improvising now, desperate for any argument that might sway him. Surely diplomatic relations can withstand a 1-year postponement. After what seemed an eternity, Friedrich nodded slowly. "Very well. 1 year, Katerina. But I expect regular reports on this foundation's progress, and I expect you to maintain appropriate royal decorum throughout." His gaze sharpened. "That includes your association with this school teacher." "Thank you, father," she said, bowing her head to hide the relief and joy that threatened to overwhelm her composure. Within days, Katerina had established the Royal Foundation for Musical Education, with offices in a wing of the palace. She assembled a team of educators, including several professors from the Vienna Conservatory, to develop a curriculum that could be implemented in villages throughout the kingdom. And she wrote to Zachary, a carefully worded letter inviting him to the capital to serve as the foundation's principal advisor. His response arrived a week later. "Your Imperial Highness ***, I am deeply honored by your invitation to participate in the Royal Foundation for Musical Education. The goals you've outlined for the program are admirable and much needed in our recovering nation. ***, however, I must respectfully decline the position in the capital. My place is here in Mehrenfeld, with the children who depend on me. The work we began together continues to flourish, and I cannot in good conscience abandon it, even for such a prestigious appointment. Instead, may I suggest that I serve the foundation in a different capacity, perhaps as a rural education coordinator, developing methods that can be adapted to various village settings while maintaining my teaching duties here, ***, with deepest respect, Zachary Iverson Katerina read the letter multiple times, her emotions a tangle of disappointment and admiration. How typical of Zachary to prioritize his students above personal advancement, it was one of the qualities she most respected in him. Still, she had hoped. No. She wouldn't allow selfish desires to cloud the Foundation's mission. If the program was to succeed, it needed dedicated educators like Zachary working in the field, not just administrators in the capital. She replied accepting his counter-proposal and suggesting that Foundation representatives would visit Mehrenfeld monthly to observe his methods and discuss implementation elsewhere. It was a professional solution that would allow their work to continue while maintaining the distance her father had implicitly demanded. Autumn painted the countryside in russet and gold as Katerina threw herself into the Foundation's work. She traveled extensively throughout Varosia, visiting schools, meeting with local officials, and overseeing the establishment of music programs modeled after what she and Zachary had created in Mehrenfeld. She saw him only during official Foundation visits, their interactions necessarily formal and focused on professional matters. Yet each encounter left her more certain of her feelings, more aware of the impossible choice that awaited at the end of her year's reprieve. Winter descended, blanketing the kingdom in snow and slowing the Foundation's expansion efforts. Katerina used the time to develop fundraising strategies, ensuring the program would continue even after her potential departure for Constantinople. In January, she received word that Mehrenfeld's children's choir had been invited to perform at a prestigious festival in Vienna, the first rural school choir ever to receive such an honor. The invitation cited the innovative teaching methods and remarkable progress made in just 6 months. Despite the harsh weather, Katerina traveled to Mehrenfeld to congratulate the children personally. Snow fell steadily as her carriage approached the village, transforming the familiar landscape into a winter wonderland. The schoolhouse was warm and bright when she arrived, filled with excited children practicing for their Vienna debut. Zachary stood at the piano, directing them with patient enthusiasm, his face alight with pride in his students' accomplishments. When he saw Katerina in the doorway, he faltered briefly before recovering his professional demeanor. "Your Imperial Highness. What an unexpected honor. I came to congratulate you and the children on the Vienna invitation," she replied, equally formal. "It's a testament to your excellent teaching." The children surrounded her, chattering excitedly about their upcoming performance. Anna, now more confident than the shy child Katerina had first met, proudly announced that she would be performing a solo. "We've been practicing every day," the girl declared. "Mr. Iverson says we must represent Mehrenfeld with dignity." "And so you shall," Katerina assured her, smiling at Zachary over the child's head. As the afternoon progressed, the snowfall intensified, transforming from gentle flurries to a proper blizzard. Concern creased Zachary's brow as he glanced out the windows at the rapidly deteriorating conditions. "Your Highness, I fear the roads may soon become impassable," he said during a break in the children's rehearsal. "Perhaps you should start back to the capital before the situation worsens." Katerina's guards expressed similar concerns, but a quick consultation revealed that the village inn was already fully occupied by travelers seeking shelter from the storm. "The schoolhouse has a small apartment upstairs where the previous teacher lived," Zachary offered hesitantly. "It's vacant but furnished. Your Highness could stay there until the storm passes." The guards inspected the space and deemed it acceptable, if modest. One would remain posted outside the door, while the others would find accommodation elsewhere in the village. As night fell, Katerina found herself alone in the simple apartment, listening to the howl of the wind outside. A soft knock at the door revealed Zachary bearing a tray with soup, bread, and tea. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, carefully maintaining a respectful distance as he set the tray on a small table. "Thank you. Won't you join me?" The invitation slipped out before she could consider its propriety. He hesitated, glancing at the guard visible in the hallway. "I'm not certain that would be appropriate, Your Highness." Katerina felt a flash of frustration at the constant barriers between them. "Please, Zachary. It's just soup, and we have much to discuss regarding the children's Vienna performance." After a moment's consideration, he nodded. "Very well. For the children's sake." They ate by lamplight, the storm raging outside creating a curious intimacy despite their careful conversation. They discussed the choir, the Foundation's progress, and plans for expanding the program to more villages in the spring. As they finished their meal, Katerina finally asked the question that had been on her mind since receiving his letter months earlier. "Why did you really decline the position in the capital?" Zachary looked up, surprised by the direct query. "I told you in my letter. The children here need you, yes. But other teachers could have been found." She held his gaze. Was that the only reason? A long silence stretched between them, filled with the sound of wind rattling the windows. "No," he admitted finally. "It wasn't the only reason." He set down his cup with deliberate care. "Your father granted you 1 year, Katerina. 1 year before you must fulfill your duty to Varozha through marriage. Had I come to the capital, what then? Develop feelings that could never be acknowledged? Watch you depart for Constantinople, knowing I had compromised not only my heart but possibly your reputation. The raw honesty of his words left her momentarily speechless. You knew about the year's reprieve. News travels, even to small villages, he said with a sad smile. Especially news concerning beautiful princesses who postpone diplomatic marriages. And you thought it better to keep your distance. I thought it kinder. To both of us. Katerina stood and moved to the window, watching snow swirl in the darkness. What if I told you I don't intend to go to Constantinople? Not in a year, not ever. She heard his sharp intake of breath. Your father will be disappointed, angry even. But I'm not the only princess of Varozha. My cousin Sophia has already expressed willingness to take my place in the alliance. She turned to face him. The Foundation's work is too important to abandon. And I've discovered something these past months that I never found in the palace: purpose. True purpose. Zachary rose slowly, his expression guarded yet hopeful. And if your father refuses? If he insists you honor the agreement? Then I would have a difficult choice to make, she admitted. But I believe the work we've begun is worth fighting for. He moved to stand before her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. We? Yes, we. Partners in this work. She hesitated, then added softly, partners in more than that, perhaps, if circumstances allowed. Katerina, he whispered, her name on his lips, a question and a prayer. The guard's cough from the hallway shattered the moment, reminding them of the realities that still stood between them. Zachary stepped back, composing himself. It grows late. You should rest. She nodded, reluctantly accepting the wisdom of his restraint. Good night, Zachary. Good night, Katerina. The storm lasted 2 days, during which Katerina remained at the schoolhouse, spending her days with the children and her evenings in careful, increasingly honest conversations with Zachary. They spoke of music, of their hopes for the Foundation's future, and gradually, of their feelings for one another, always mindful of the guard's presence, always conscious of the boundaries that still existed. When the roads finally cleared enough for travel, Katerina returned to the capital with a clarity of purpose she had never before possessed. Spring arrived with renewal both literal and symbolic. The Foundation flourished, establishing programs in over 20 villages. The children's choir from Mehrenfeld performed triumphantly in Vienna, earning accolades from critics and invitations to perform throughout Europe. And Katerina prepared for a final confrontation with her father, one that would determine the course of her life. She found the emperor in the palace gardens, enjoying the season's first roses. Age had softened him somewhat, and his pride in the Foundation's accomplishments was genuine, if tempered by practical concerns about its long-term funding. Father, Katerina began, my year of reprieve is nearly complete. Friedrich nodded, his expression grave. I've already reopened negotiations with the Ottoman court. Prince Mehmed remains amenable to the match, though his patience has been tested by the delay. I cannot marry him, she said simply. Not now, not ever. Rather than anger, resignation crossed the emperor's features. Because of the schoolmaster. It wasn't a question, but Katerina answered anyway. Partly, yes. But also because I've found my purpose, my place in this world. The Foundation needs leadership, and I can serve Varozha better here than as a diplomatic bride in a foreign court. Friedrich studied a rose, gently touching its petals. And what of our southern border? The alliance this marriage would secure. Cousin Sophia has expressed willingness to take my place. She's of royal blood, educated in the same traditions. The alliance would be equally valid with her as the bride. Sophia, the emperor mused. She has always been politically minded. He turned to face his daughter fully. And you? What life do you envision if I release you from this obligation? Katerina took a deep breath. I would continue leading the Foundation, expanding its work throughout the kingdom. And yes, eventually, I would hope for a marriage based on mutual respect and shared purpose, rather than diplomatic necessity. To a commoner, Friedrich stated flatly. A village school teacher. To an extraordinary man who sees me for who I am, not merely what I represent. She met her father's gaze steadily. I'm not naive, father. I understand such a union would be unconventional. Perhaps I would need to renounce certain royal privileges, take a step back in the line of succession. The emperor was silent for a long moment, contemplating the garden around them. Finally, he sighed. You are so like your mother, determined, passionate about your convictions. A hint of softness entered his voice. She would have approved, I think. Hope flickered in Katerina's heart. Then you'll consider my request. I will do more than consider it, Friedrich replied. I will grant it, with conditions. You may continue your work with the foundation and pursue personal happiness as you see fit. However, any marriage must still receive royal approval, and you must maintain certain ceremonial duties as a princess of Varosia. Joy bubbled up within her, but Katerina maintained her composure. Thank you, father. I will honor these conditions. As she turned to leave, the emperor added, this schoolmaster of yours, he must be quite remarkable to have captured the heart of a princess. Katerina smiled. He is, father. I believe you'll think so too, when you meet him. Summer returned to Mahrenfeld, painting the countryside in vibrant greens and wildflower colors. The village had changed since Katerina's first visit, the school had expanded, new businesses had opened, and there was an air of prosperity that had been absent before. She arrived without ceremony, her simple carriage attracting little attention as it rolled through the village to stop before the schoolhouse. Children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. Zachary stood on the steps, watching her approach with an expression of wonder and cautious hope. Your Highness, he began formally, then stopped himself. Katerina. I received your letter, but I scarcely dared believe. She smiled, her heart full as she stood before him in the sunlight. It's true. All of it. I'm free to continue the foundation's work, free to follow my heart. She took a step closer. Free to love whom I choose. Around them, children gathered, whispering excitedly as they recognized the princess who had brought music into their lives. And whom do you choose? Zachary asked softly. Katerina reached for his hand, his scarred, capable hand that had guided children, created music, and ultimately helped her find her true path. I choose the man who taught me that royal blood means nothing without purpose, she said. The man who saw beyond my title to the person beneath. The man who brings music to children and hope to forgotten places. He entwined his fingers with hers, no longer concerned with protocol or propriety. I have nothing to offer a princess, he said, though his eyes told a different story. You have everything to offer, Katerina replied. Music, purpose, understanding. She smiled. And perhaps, if you're willing, a lifetime of creating something beautiful together. The children of Mahrenfeld witnessed the first kiss between their teacher and their princess, a moment that would become part of village legend for generations to come. They didn't understand the barriers that had been overcome or the sacrifices that had been made. They knew only that music had transformed their village, their futures, and the lives of two people who had found each other across the divides of class and circumstance. In the years that followed, Princess Katerina and Zachary Iverson would marry in a ceremony that blended royal tradition with the simple authenticity of village life. The Royal Foundation would expand throughout Varosia and beyond, bringing music education to thousands of children. And on quiet evenings, in their home that was neither palace nor cottage but something uniquely their own, they would play music together, he with his three-fingered hand creating harmonies that complemented her melodies, their compositions telling the story of a princess who found her true purpose, and her heart, teaching music to village children.